I'll never forget the day the doctor told us my son, Jacob, would need a cane. He was only 11, all big brown eyes and that quiet courage kids sometimes have when they know the adults around them are breaking inside. He'd been diagnosed with a degenerative muscle condition a few months earlier, and though we'd been warned it would eventually affect his ability to walk, we hadn't expected it so soon. I tried to smile as they fitted him for the cane, tried to tell him it was just like carrying a knight's sword, but deep down, it felt like the world had shifted. Jacob didn't say much that day. He just tapped the cane softly against the floor, testing the balance, and gave me a small nod. It wasn't just a stick. That cane became his lifeline. Every morning, he'd grip it with both hands, steady himself, and step out the door like the world wasn't about to knock him off balance. It gave him independence. It gave him dignity. Our neighborhood wasn't exactly bustling, but Jacob loved walking down our little street. The sidewalks were wide enough for him to practice his steps, and every tree was familiar. He'd pause to pat the neighbor's golden retriever or wave at the elderly couple who spent their mornings tending their roses. It was one of the few places where he felt safe enough to walk on his own, even if I was always just a few steps behind, pretending to give him space. There was one person who never waved. Karen. Now, I don't like to speak badly about anyone, but Karen was, well, Karen. She was the type who memorized every HOA rule and could sniff out a violation from 2 streets over. Her perfectly trimmed hedges and gleaming SUV were the pride of the neighborhood, or so she believed. She'd glare at kids playing too close to her lawn and fuss about garbage cans not being pulled in fast enough. But she never said anything to Jacob. Not at first. I remember one afternoon in particular. The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows across the sidewalk. Jacob was walking slowly, tapping his cane softly with each step. He was humming something under his breath, probably a song from one of his favorite old Disney movies. I was a few feet behind, carrying his school bag, when I noticed Karen standing on her porch, arms crossed, eyes fixed on him. At the time, I thought nothing of it. People stared sometimes. They didn't mean harm, they just didn't know what to say. But Karen's gaze wasn't soft or curious. It was sharp, calculating, like she was filing something away for later. Jacob noticed too. He lowered his head and quickened his pace, the rubber tip of the cane tapping harder against the concrete. Later that night, as I tucked him into bed, he asked, "Mom, do people think I'm weird?" I froze for a moment, then sat on the edge of his bed and brushed his hair back from his forehead. "No, sweetheart," I said softly. "They think you're strong. They think you're brave." But even as I said it, I thought of Karen's stare and felt a tightness in my chest. The next day, Jacob's cane left a small scuff mark on the sidewalk. It was nothing, barely visible unless you were looking for it. He'd stumbled a bit while walking home from school, catching himself just in time. The scrape of the metal tip had left a faint line on the concrete. I didn't even notice it until Karen came marching up to my door that evening. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Your son's cane is scratching up the neighborhood sidewalks," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "This is common property, and we can't have it damaged." I blinked, unsure I'd heard her right. "Excuse me." She pointed toward the sidewalk in front of my house like she was presenting evidence in a courtroom. "Right there. You can see the marks. He's been dragging that thing and it's leaving scratches. If this continues, we'll have to file an HOA violation." I looked at the sidewalk, then back at her. "He's not dragging it," I said, keeping my voice as even as I could. "He uses it to walk. It's a medical device. Surely you can understand." "Medical device or not, it's damaging property," she interrupted. "We have rules for a reason. If you can't keep him from doing that, we'll have to fine you for repairs." Something inside me snapped. I wanted to tell her what that cane meant, how much strength it took for Jacob to even leave the house some days, how every mark on that sidewalk was a testament to a boy fighting for his independence. But before I could speak, I heard a small voice behind me. "Mom!" Jacob was standing in the doorway, clutching his cane like a shield. His eyes darted from me to Karen, and I could see the fear creeping in. He knew she was talking about him. Karen gave him a tight smile, the kind adults use when they're pretending to be kind but are anything but. "Hi Jacob," she said. "We just need to make sure you're more careful when you're walking, okay? We don't want you scratching the sidewalks." His grip on the cane tightened. I'm not trying to," he whispered. "I'm sure you're not," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "But we all have to do our part." Then she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Jacob standing there, small and silent in the doorway. That night, he wouldn't meet my eyes. He just sat on his bed, holding his cane across his lap. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice barely audible. My heart shattered. "Jacob, no. You have nothing to be sorry for. But if I'm messing things up..." "You're not messing anything up," I said firmly, crouching down so we were eye level. "That cane helps you walk. It helps you be strong. Do you hear me? You have absolutely nothing to apologize for." He nodded, but I could tell he didn't believe me. After he fell asleep, I went outside and stared at the faint scuff marks on the sidewalk. They were barely noticeable, but in my mind, they looked like battle scars. Each one told the story of a little boy who refused to give up, who fought with every step he took. And yet, to Karen, they were nothing but damage. I clenched my fists, anger and sadness washing over me in waves. This wasn't about scratches. It was about dignity, my son's dignity. And I knew, right then and there, I wasn't going to let anyone take that from him. The next morning, I could still feel the sting of Karen's words echoing in my head. Damaging property. It wasn't just about the sidewalk. I knew it. She had looked at Jacob as though his mere presence, his cane, his careful steps, were some kind of burden. And the worst part was, my son had heard every word. I tried to carry on with the day as though nothing was wrong. Jacob had school, and I had work, but the house felt heavier somehow. He moved slower that morning, as though the weight of Karen's complaint had added years to his little shoulders. He avoided looking at his cane, letting it rest against the table until the last possible moment before we had to leave. "Do you want me to drive you all the way up to the front door today?" I asked softly as we got ready to leave. Normally, Jacob liked to walk the last stretch to school. He said it made him feel independent, and I understood that. But today he just shrugged. "Yeah," he mumbled. "That's fine." As we pulled up, he clutched his backpack close, the cane tucked under his arm. He didn't even glance at the sidewalks where the scuff marks might have been visible. He just stepped out and walked up the ramp as fast as his legs would let him. That was the thing about Jacob. He never wanted to be a burden. And now, thanks to Karen, he felt like he was. A week passed without incident. I thought maybe Karen had gotten whatever venom she needed to spit out of her system. But I was wrong. On Friday evening, a letter arrived in the mail from the HOA. It was formal, typed out on heavy paper with their seal at the top. I unfolded it slowly, and my heart sank as I read the words. Notice of violation. Your child's mobility device has been observed causing scratches and damage to community property, specifically the sidewalks. This is a violation of HOA Property Maintenance Guidelines, Section 4, Article B. Please address this issue immediately. Failure to do so will result in fines and further action. My hands trembled as I read it. They'd put it in writing. They'd taken Karen's complaint and turned it into an official notice, as though my son's cane, his lifeline, was some kind of vandalism tool. Jacob was at the table, working on a drawing, when he noticed my face. "Mom, what's wrong?" I hesitated, not wanting to show him the letter. But he could tell. Kids always can. "It's just HOA stuff," I said, forcing a smile. "Nothing you need to worry about." He frowned, leaning forward to see what I was holding. "Is it about me?" I couldn't lie. I nodded slowly, and he bit his lip. "They're mad about the sidewalk, aren't they?" I knelt beside him. Listen to me, Jacob. This isn't your fault. That cane helps you walk, and you have every right to use it. Do you hear me? But he was already withdrawing, shrinking into himself. Maybe I should just stay inside more, he whispered. Then I won't mess up the sidewalk. Those words sliced through me like a blade. Absolutely not, I said firmly. You will not stop living your life because some people can't see past their own rules. But even as I said it, I knew this wasn't over. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Tuesday. I didn't normally attend. They were usually about landscaping budgets and pool maintenance, but this time I marked the date on the calendar in red ink. The room was packed when I arrived, the usual crowd of neighbors murmuring among themselves. Karen was already there, perched at the front like a queen surveying her court. When she saw me, her lips curved into a small, tight smile. I sat near the back, gripping the violation letter in my hand. The meeting droned on for a while about minor issues, trash collection schedules, repainting the clubhouse. I barely heard a word, my heart pounding louder with each passing minute. Finally, the HOA president, a man named Richard, cleared his throat and said, "Next on the agenda, community property damage reports." Karen's hand shot up immediately. "Yes, Karen?" Richard said. She stood, holding a small stack of photos like she was presenting evidence to a jury. As I've previously reported, there's been ongoing damage to the sidewalks in front of several homes. The cause, as we've all observed, is the cane being used by one of the residents' children. Murmurs rippled through the room. Karen fanned out the photos for everyone to see. I caught glimpses of faint scratches, barely noticeable unless you were looking for them. "We all pay to maintain these sidewalks," she continued. "If this kind of damage continues, it could cost the community thousands in repairs." I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "You're talking about my son," I said, my voice shaking with anger. Karen didn't even flinch. "I'm talking about the damage being caused," she said smoothly. "This isn't personal." "Not personal?" My voice cracked. "You're singling out an 11-year-old boy with a disability because you don't like the sound of his cane tapping the sidewalk." Karen gave me a pitying look that made my blood boil. "No one's singling anyone out. But rules are rules. If his cane is leaving marks, perhaps he could use a rubber tip or find another way to." "He already has a rubber tip," I snapped. "And he's not going to stop walking on the sidewalks like any other kid. He's not going to be shut inside because you think he's a nuisance." The room was silent. Karen shifted her stance. "We're simply asking for accountability. If the damage continues, the fines will increase." Richard cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Let's take a vote," he said weakly. But I'd heard enough. "You do what you want," I said, my voice low. "But know this, if you think I'm going to let you shame my son for trying to live his life, you're mistaken." I grabbed my bag and walked out before they could respond. When I got home, Jacob was waiting by the window. He must have seen the look on my face because he didn't ask how it went. He just said softly, "It's my fault, isn't it?" I dropped to my knees and wrapped him in my arms. "No," I whispered fiercely. "It's not your fault. You're the bravest kid I know, Jacob. And you know what? I'm going to show them just how strong you are." He pulled back, blinking. "How?" I glanced at his cane, the same cane Karen claimed was damaging property, and an idea began to form. A small, defiant smile tugged at my lips. "You'll see," I said. For the first time in days, Jacob's shoulders eased just a little. The plan formed slowly, like a storm building on the horizon. I'd lain awake half the night thinking about Jacob's small voice asking if he should stay inside so he wouldn't mess up the sidewalk. That sentence haunted me. It was proof that Karen and the HOA's cruel obsession with rules had already gotten under his skin, chipping away at his confidence. By morning, my mind was made up. I wasn't going to let them bully my son. But before I could even gather my thoughts and figure out what to do next, another letter from the HOA arrived. It was worse than the first. Notice of escalated violation. Failure to address your previous violation regarding property damage caused by your child's mobility device has resulted in a $500 fine. Continued violations will result in legal action and a lien placed on your property. I felt my breath leave my body as I read the words. A lien? Over Jacob's cane touching the sidewalk? I didn't even realize Jacob was standing behind me until I felt his small hand tug at my shirt. Is that about me again? I quickly folded the letter and tried to smile, but he'd already seen the words fine and legal action. His face crumpled. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice trembling. Jacob, no. He shook his head and backed away from me, tears spilling down his cheeks. It's my fault. If I didn't have this stupid cane, they wouldn't be mad at you. I knelt in front of him, grabbing his shoulders gently. Hey, don't you ever call it stupid. That cane helps you walk. It helps you be strong. You haven't done a single thing wrong, do you understand? He looked down, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. But they hate me. I swallowed hard, forcing down the lump in my throat. No. They just don't understand. But they're going to, Jacob. I promise you. I sat at the kitchen table for hours after Jacob went to his room, the violation letter spread out in front of me like a challenge. I'd never been much of a fighter. I was the type who followed the rules, kept my head down, and avoided conflict. But this was different. This wasn't just about money or HOA politics. This was about my son's dignity. Karen and her HOA buddies had no idea what that cane symbolized. They didn't see how hard Jacob worked every day just to take a few steps without stumbling. They didn't see the quiet determination in his face as he tapped that cane forward, one small step at a time, refusing to let his condition define him. But I would make them see. The next day, I called a friend of mine, Mark, who ran a local engraving shop. He'd helped me out in the past with plaques for school fundraisers and custom gifts. Hey Mark, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I need a special engraving job done. And it needs to be bold. He laughed. You always bring me interesting projects. What's this one for? I told him the story, the letters, the meetings, the threat. His laughter faded quickly. Are you serious? They're fining you over a kid's cane touching the sidewalk. Serious as a heart attack, I said. And I'm done letting them make Jacob feel like he's a problem. So here's what I want. I want every single HOA rule they've ever quoted to me, every ridiculous article and subsection, engraved into that cane. Word for word. There was a pause on the line, then a low whistle. Oh, I like where this is going. Not just the rules about property damage, I added. All of it. Every bit of their obsession with control, etched where they can see it. Mark chuckled darkly. It'll take me a day, but I can do it. Bring the cane by tomorrow. That night, I told Jacob my plan. He looked at me with wide eyes. You're going to put the rules on my cane? Every single one, I said. So the next time Karen or anyone from the HOA sees you walking, they'll be reminded of just how ridiculous they're being. He hesitated, then a tiny smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. Like, they'll have to read their own rules every time I take a step? Exactly, I said, grinning. It's not just a cane, Jacob. It's your statement. Your proof that you belong here just as much as anyone else. His shoulders relaxed for the first time in days. Can we make the letters big? So Karen can't pretend she doesn't see. Oh, don't you worry, I said. She'll see it. The following afternoon, Mark handed me the finished cane, and for a moment, I just stared at it in awe. The dark wooden shaft was now etched with rows of gleaming silver letters, each one a section of the HOA rulebook. They wrapped around the cane in a spiral, starting at the top and winding all the way down to the tip. Even the rubber base had a small plate attached, engraved with the phrase, I am not damaging property, I am living. When I brought it home and handed it to Jacob, he ran his fingers over the words slowly, reading them aloud in a soft, deliberate voice. This is amazing, he whispered. It's like it's telling them off without even saying anything. That's the idea, I said with a smile. Now, do you want to take it for a walk? We stepped outside together, and for the first time in a long time, Jacob didn't seem nervous about using his cane. He tapped it against the sidewalk with confidence, each step sending the engraved words glinting in the sunlight. We didn't have to wait long before Karen appeared. She was walking her immaculate little Pomeranian, as usual, and when she spotted us, her lips pursed. I watched her eyes fall to the cane, saw the moment she registered the words spiraling down its length. Her face reddened instantly. Is that HOA property code? She sputtered, squinting. Why, yes, I said, my voice calm. All of it. Jacob wanted to make sure he didn't forget the rules. After all, we wouldn't want to damage property, would we? Karen's jaw tightened. This is ridiculous. Not as ridiculous as fining a child for walking, I said. Jacob stood a little taller, gripping the cane proudly. I'm not going to stop walking, he said softly but firmly. Karen opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Finally, she turned on her heel and stormed off, her Pomeranian yipping at her feet. That night, as I tucked Jacob into bed, he looked up at me with a small, shy smile. Mom. Yeah, sweetie. Thank you for making them see me. Tears pricked my eyes. Oh, Jacob. They should have seen you all along. But I promise you this, they'll never make you feel invisible again. He nodded, clutching his cane like it was a sword, and for the first time in weeks, he drifted off to sleep with peace on his face. The next few days after Karen's public embarrassment were strangely quiet. I half expected her to barge up to my door again, waving another violation letter and sputtering about community standards. But she didn't. Instead, she glared from a distance. Whenever we passed her house, I could feel her eyes burning into us through her pristine blinds. Jacob noticed too. Do you think she's mad at me? He asked one morning as we set out for his usual walk. He was tapping the engraved cane proudly, each word gleaming in the early sunlight. She's not mad at you, I said gently. She's mad at herself because she knows she's wrong. And now she can't stand the fact that everyone else knows it too. He tilted his head. Everyone? I nodded. You'd be surprised who's watching, Jacob. People pay attention when someone stands up for themselves. He smiled, but it was tentative, like he was still afraid of making the wrong step. That hurt me more than Karen's violation letters ever could. My little boy had done nothing but exist, and yet he'd been made to feel like a burden. That's when I decided I wasn't finished. The cane was only the beginning. The idea came to me when I stopped by the mailbox later that day and noticed the HOA bulletin board by the clubhouse. Karen's printed rules were plastered there, neatly laminated and secured with thumbtacks. No parking overnight on the street. No trash cans left out past 8 p.m. No basketball hoops in driveways. No clutter in front yards. And, tucked somewhere in the middle, no damage to community property, including sidewalk. The sight of those words, written so coldly and without a shred of humanity, made my stomach turn. It wasn't just Jacob who'd been affected by their nitpicking. I remembered the single mom down the street who'd been fined for leaving her stroller on the porch, and the elderly man with arthritis who got a notice for weeds growing in his yard because he couldn't keep up with the HOA's demands. Karen and her board had been wielding these rules like weapons for years, so I decided to fight back. The next morning, I called Mark at the engraving shop again. Back so soon, he teased. Yeah, I said, lowering my voice. And this time, I'm thinking bigger than just the cane. Oh, this I have to hear. I want to take the exact same HOA rules they've been using to bully people, I said, and put them somewhere they can't ignore. Something permanent. Something public. He laughed. What are you thinking? A sign. Not just a sign, I said. A statement. I want the entire list of HOA rules etched into a massive plaque and installed at the clubhouse for everyone to see. No flowery language, no edits, just their own words carved in stone. And I want Jacob's cane there the day we put it up. Mark whistled. That's bold. It's not just for me, I said. It's for everyone they've pushed around. I want them to be reminded that behind every rule is a real person they've hurt. Consider it done, Mark said. But it'll take a week to make something that big. And you'll need permission to put it up. I smiled. Trust me, I'm not asking for permission. That week felt longer than any in recent memory. Jacob was still walking with his cane every day, but he kept glancing nervously at Karen's house, as though waiting for her to lash out again. One evening, as we passed her perfectly trimmed hedges, she stepped out onto her porch and called out, "Enjoying your little protest, are you?" Jacob froze, but I squeezed his hand gently. "We're enjoying our walk," I said evenly. She sneered. "You think engraving those rules makes you clever? It doesn't change the fact that your son is damaging property with every step." Jacob flinched. I took a slow breath, reminding myself not to lose my temper in front of him. Those sidewalks belong to everyone, Karen. And my son has every right to walk on them. Every single mark on that concrete is a reminder that he's strong enough to keep going, even when people try to tear him down. Karen's eyes narrowed. "We'll see what the board has to say about that." "Go ahead," I said. "But you might want to clear your schedule next Saturday. I think you'll be very interested in what's going up at the clubhouse." Her brow furrowed, but I didn't wait for a reply. Jacob and I just kept walking, the engraved words on his cane flashing defiantly with every tap. Saturday came, and with it, a quiet buzz of curiosity. Mark and I arrived early at the clubhouse, hauling the massive bronze plaque from his truck. It was heavy and gleaming, nearly 3 feet tall and wide enough to cover the entire bulletin board. Every single HOA rule was etched into the surface in clean, unmissable letters. Neighbors began gathering as word spread. Some whispered, others stared openly. Even those who'd never spoken up about the HOA's strictness seemed intrigued. Jacob stood beside me, holding his cane with both hands. He looked small next to the towering plaque, but I could see the pride in his eyes. "Ready?" I asked. He nodded. Together, we stepped forward as Mark drilled the plaque into the clubhouse wall. The metallic clink of the screws echoing against the brick sounded like a battle drum. When it was finally secure, we stepped back and let everyone take it in. Gasps rippled through the crowd. One elderly man whispered, "They really fine kids for walking now?" A mother clutching a toddler shook her head. "This is ridiculous. I thought it was just me getting targeted." Karen arrived minutes later, storming across the lawn with a clipboard clutched in her hands. Her face went scarlet when she saw the plaque. "What is the meaning of this?" she screeched. I turned to face her calmly. "Just helping you share the rules you love so much. Now everyone can see exactly how this HOA operates. You can't just install this without approval," she snapped. "Funny," I said. "You didn't seem to care about approval when you sent violation letters to a child. So I guess we're even." The crowd murmured in agreement. Karen looked around, realizing for the first time that the neighbors weren't on her side. Several people stepped forward, voicing their own grievances: fines for tiny infractions, threats of liens, humiliation over harmless mistakes. "This is out of control," someone muttered. "You're making people scared to live here," another said. Karen's lips thinned. She opened her mouth to retort, but then her eyes landed on Jacob. He stood a few feet away, reading the plaque out loud to himself, his small voice carrying over the murmurs. "No damage to community property, including sidewalks." He looked up at her then, gripping his cane tightly. "I'm not damaging anything. I'm just walking." For the first time, Karen faltered. That evening, as we walked home, Jacob looked up at me. "Mom, do you think they'll take the plaque down?" "Maybe," I admitted. "But that's not what matters." He frowned. "Then what does?" I smiled down at him. "What matters is that they saw you, Jacob. They heard you. And now they can't pretend they didn't." He ran his fingers along the engraved words on his cane. "It feels good," he said softly. Good. Like I'm not invisible anymore. My throat tightened. You were never invisible, sweetheart. You're stronger than anyone I know. And now everyone else knows it too. The plaque stayed up. At first, I thought the HOA board would remove it quietly, slipping it down under the cover of night the way they liked to sneak violation letters into mailboxes. But days passed, and it remained gleaming on the clubhouse wall for all to see. And with each passing day, more neighbors stopped to read it. I would see them from our kitchen window, parents with kids in strollers, retirees walking their dogs, teens on bicycles. They would pause, tilt their heads, and trace the words with their eyes. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others muttered things under their breath, glancing around as if finally realizing how absurd the rules were when displayed so openly. It was as if the entire neighborhood had woken up from a fog. Jacob noticed too. He began walking a little taller. He had always tapped his cane lightly, almost apologetically, as though afraid the sound alone might bother someone. But now, the rhythmic tap-tap-tap echoed proudly down the sidewalk. Every strike of the cane felt like punctuation on a statement that could no longer be ignored. And people started noticing him, not the way Karen noticed him, but the way he deserved. One afternoon, Mrs. Gonzalez, the sweet grandmother who lived 3 houses down, stopped Jacob as he walked by. She crouched to his level, her kind eyes shining. "I just want you to know," she said softly, "I think you're the bravest kid in this neighborhood. Don't you ever forget that." Jacob's ears went pink. "Thank you," he mumbled, clutching his cane tighter. Others followed. A young couple waved and complimented his engraved cane. A teenager on a skateboard gave him a fist bump, saying, "Dude, that's hardcore." For the first time in months, my son walked without glancing nervously at Karen's house. Karen, on the other hand, was fuming. I caught her a few times hovering near the clubhouse, glaring at the plaque like it was personally mocking her. But she didn't touch it, not with so many people watching. At the next HOA meeting, she tried to rally the board into removing it. "This plaque is a mockery of our community," she snapped, slamming her hands on the table. But this time, her voice didn't carry the same weight it once had. "Actually," Richard, the HOA president, said cautiously, "I think it's good for transparency. The neighbors deserve to see the rules clearly laid out." Karen's jaw dropped. Transparency? This is humiliation. A few members of the audience shifted uncomfortably, and one man spoke up from the back. "No, what's humiliating is fining a little boy for using a cane. That's what made us all look bad, Karen." Murmurs of agreement filled the room. Karen's face turned beet red. She opened her mouth to retort, but this time, no one was nodding along. She was alone. By the following week, a petition had begun circulating quietly among the neighbors. It wasn't mine. I hadn't even heard about it until Mrs. Gonzalez knocked on my door one evening, holding a clipboard. "We're making some changes to the HOA," she said with a smile. "The board needs to be reminded that they work for the community, not the other way around. Would you like to sign?" I didn't hesitate. The day everything changed for good was a sunny Saturday morning. Jacob wanted to walk to the clubhouse again, and I went with him. As we turned the corner, I noticed a larger crowd than usual gathered there. People were holding coffee cups, chatting in small groups, and I could see the clipboard making its round. Karen stood off to the side, arms crossed, lips pressed so tightly they were white. Richard, the HOA president, stepped up and cleared his throat. "I want to thank everyone for coming today. We've heard your concerns about how the HOA has been enforcing rules, and I want to assure you, changes are coming. Effective immediately, all previous fines regarding the so-called sidewalk damage are dismissed. And we will be reviewing every single regulation to make sure they're actually about maintaining the neighborhood, not policing it." A cheer rippled through the crowd. Karen sputtered. "You can't just—" "Yes, we can," Richard interrupted, his tone sharper than I'd ever heard. "This board answers to the community. And this community has spoken." He gestured toward Jacob, who was standing beside me, gripping his cane like a badge of honor. "This young man reminded us what this neighborhood is supposed to be about," Richard said, his voice softening. "Not fear. Not fines. Community. We owe him a thank you." For a moment, Jacob just stood there, wide-eyed as dozens of people turned and applauded him. His cheeks flushed pink and he whispered, "Mom, they're clapping for me?" I bent down and kissed the top of his head. "Yes, sweetheart. They're clapping for you." Karen slunk away before the applause died down. She didn't even look at us as she hurried to her car and drove off, tires squealing. I wasn't interested in revenge or humiliation. This was never about that. It was about making sure Jacob knew he was valued, that his existence didn't have to be an apology. And judging by the smile on his face as he waved to the neighbors, I knew he finally understood. That afternoon, Jacob and I walked the entire neighborhood. We didn't rush. We took our time, stopping to pet dogs and chat with neighbors who came out to greet him. He tapped his cane confidently on the sidewalk, each sound ringing louder than ever before. At one point, he stopped and looked up at me. "Mom." "Yes, Jacob? I like walking now. I don't feel like I'm in trouble anymore." My chest tightened with emotion. "Good," I said softly. "Because you were never in trouble to begin with. And you never will be again." He nodded, gripping my hand. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky shades of orange and gold, I watched Jacob walking ahead of me. His silhouette was framed by the glowing light, his cane gleaming like a sword. I realized then that the faint scuff marks his cane had once left on the sidewalk were still there. They weren't marks of damage, as Karen had claimed. They were proof. Proof of resilience. Proof of a boy who kept going, no matter how many obstacles were thrown in his way. And now, the whole neighborhood knew it too. I wish I could say that one engraved cane changed the world. It didn't. But it changed our little corner of it. Jacob doesn't look down when he walks anymore. He doesn't apologize for existing. He walks proudly. And sometimes, as we pass the clubhouse and I see the plaque gleaming in the sunlight, I think about how close I came to letting Karen and her rules break his spirit. But they didn't. He's stronger than that.